So I'm a father of one. I gotta find a babysitter. I found Care.com and I was blown away. Through the platform, I was able to find local and experienced candidates along with their reviews and rates, which were way more affordable than I anticipated. Care.com really put me at ease knowing that they were all required to go through a background check. If you're like me and you need to find someone reliable for your childcare necessities, check out Care.com. Find the ideal sitters for your childcare needs.
West Virginia picks up a dominant win over TCU out there in Morgantown as the Mountaineers dominated from start to finish over the Horned Frogs. Texas Tech, with a fourth quarter comeback, is able to outlast Baylor 24-23 out there in Lubbock. And, well, top half of the league was off this weekend as the top 5 teams in the standings were all on bye on Saturday in the Big 12 Conference. Welcome in here to the 10 of 12 podcast. I am your host, Ryan Gilbert. We'll, of course, be recapping those 2 games on today's show, as well as previewing this weekend's upcoming 3 games. Those ones, hopefully, knock on wood, should be a little bit better than those games we had from this past Saturday. Those, of course, will be K-State and Iowa State, Bedlam with Oklahoma State and Oklahoma, and then we've got Kansas and Texas. We'll be talking about those games with Cole Carmody, but first here we'll be talking about the West Virginia game with Chris Anderson from earsports.com. So should be a lot of fun here on the show today. We've got 2 games to digest from this past weekend, 3 to preview coming up. Next weekend we'll also, of course, as we do every single show, we'll be going through our power rankings, kind of giving my reasons as to where the teams are ranked in the latest 10 of 12 top 10. Obviously, there's no movement at the top, of course, with all those teams on bye, but the bottom half does have a tiny bit of movement after this weekend's games of play. We'll bring in Chris Anderson here from Ear Sports to talk about that West Virginia game. Chris, how's it going today, man?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, thank you. Getting right into it here, you got the win over TCU, 24-6 out there in Morgantown. What are your initial key takeaways from that game?
I think it was probably the cleanest, most tidy game for West Virginia this year. Offense kind of did whatever they wanted. I know 24 points doesn't sound like a lot, but almost 400 yards offense, averaging almost 6 yards per play or over 6 yards per play, 6.2, and just kind of, I guess, mailed it in the second half once they realized that there was no way that TCU was going to score 20 points. They just kind of ran the ball, brought in a bunch of subs and coasted to victory and amazingly finished in 3 hours. It's the first 3-hour football game I think I've covered in quite a long time.
Would you say this was more of West Virginia's dominance or TCU's, I guess, failure to capitalize on some of those opportunities they had?
I think it was a very favorable matchup for West Virginia. When I looked at it, I saw a lot of what TCU had and what they do well and what they don't do well kind of lined up with Kansas State as well. Like when you're attacking West Virginia, the way to beat their defense specifically is to go vertical, to go down the field, to have a power running game kind of between the tackles with a running back or with your quarterback. And over the course of the year, a lot of TCU's bigger gains and what Max Duggan has done has been to the outside, and West Virginia's defense has just kind of proven this year that they're too fast to really trying to get to the edges on them. And I think that shut down TCU early, and they didn't really have an answer for that. I think there was just one player, I believe Miller, was the last name, running back, Kendry Miller. He had a couple big runs, but they didn't turn to him much, only eight carries for him. So it was really just more of a poor matchup for TCU, great matchup for West Virginia.
You touched on it a little bit earlier, how they were well balanced in this game. Daggy only threw it for 212 yards, which isn't the best for him. But then Brown had 156 rushing yards on the ground. So how important is it for this offense to be balanced, like you said?
Well, yeah, I think we saw it in the Texas game. In that Texas game, Letty Brown, the star running back for West Virginia, ranks top 10 nationally in basically every rushing category he got hurt on the first drive, and West Virginia was able to and none of the backup running backs were able to step in and produce the same way Brown does. So West Virginia got around that by going to the quick passing game to the edges. And that only kind of works, between the 30-yard line. Because once you get too close to the end zone, the defenses can play up. They're going to defend against that. And it can not only stifle that type of play, but can turn into a dangerous kind of turnover and return. So once West Virginia got close, they couldn't do anything because they couldn't run up the middle. They couldn't do those quick passes. Backup running backs weren't doing anything. And that's why West Virginia ended up with 5 red zone trips. Actually, I think they might have out-yarded Texas for the day, and got in the red zone 5 times and only scored 1 touchdown.
I'm glad you brought up that Texas game, actually. That was something I wanted to talk about as well. Looking at that game, I know the Mountaineer fans have maybe been a little upset about the officiating going on with some of those calls in their games. But, looking at kind of this game and maybe the Tech game where they lose it by a touchdown, how much missed opportunities do you think the Mountaineers have had? I know you mentioned there on getting into the red zone and not scoring in that Texas game. I know that Neil Brown probably went for it a few times there. And if he would have, hindsight's 2020, simply went for those field goals, you're probably looking at a win down there in Austin. So, I guess my question here is, you're 4-3 right now if you're West Virginia in the league. Is it, we're 4-3, or is it, hey, we're 4-3? What's kind of the vibe out there in Morgantown?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag because you look at first, like you said, 4-3 in the league and 5-3 overall. And they're maybe literally 2 plays away from 7-1 and ranked in the top 15 in the country. And you're talking, holy cow, 7-1, control your own destiny, the Big 12 title game, ranked top 15, one of the best defenses in the country. What are we talking about here? And instead it's 5-3. And that's that kind of tempers things, obviously, a lot. There's a drastic difference between 7-1 and 5-3. But then you kind of look at it at the progression that they've made in year 2 under Neil Brown. Everyone knew last year was going to be bad because Neil Brown's in his first year. Daniel Holgorsen left, and a part of the reason behind that was that the roster was going to be completely depleted with the graduating class, NFL guys all leaving after that 2018 team. So everybody knew it was going to be bad. 5-7 was actually maybe a little better than what people thought, at least the more sensible people in Morgantown thought. And then, but even in that, out of those 7 losses, 3 of them, West Virginia was not even competitive. Like it was over almost as soon as the first drive happened. In 2 other ones were close. 2 others they kept close to about halftime and then ended up getting blown out in the second half. So 5 of the 7, you're talking, are 3-score games in the third and fourth quarter. It's not even you're not even bothering with the game. But this time around, all 3 losses, 2 of them by a touchdown or less, 2 of them where West Virginia is driving to take the lead in the fourth quarter and just can't finish. So I think you look at it that way and you think, hey, things are looking up.
Last year in Manhattan, we saw that K-State fans were unfortunately there to see West Virginia's, I wouldn't say, breakout game or anything like that. But we saw once Kendall was out and Doege was in at quarterback, we kind of saw a little bit of a new life for the Mountaineers. And that's kind of carried over to this year as well. How important has Doege been to this team overall?
He's big. I think he just brings a different dynamic to this offense. Statistically, you look at the team as a whole as far as points per game. Granted, up until a couple games ago, because recently West Virginia has been scoring a little bit more, but the difference wasn't that great as far as total offense or points per game once Doege came in for Kendall. But if you watch the game closely and you watch what Doege does, Kendall can't make the throws that Doege can make, and Doege was making throws to get his receivers open, scrambling to stay open or to keep the play alive in the pocket. And so the difference was drastic. I think if Kendall's in those games, if Kendall's in that Kansas State game, for instance, I don't think West Virginia wins. I'm not sure West Virginia wins the TCU game either. I think Doege made a couple plays in those that got WVU the win that I don't think Kendall could make.
We're going to take a step back again with Neil Brown. I mean, even this year, you go back to that Oklahoma State game. Sure, they lost it by a couple touchdowns, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think that the Mountaineers had more total yards than the Cowboys. You lose a Texas game by 4, you lose a Texas Tech game by 7. So, I mean, you said they could be 7-1. I mean, this team could be 8-0 right now if just a handful of plays kind of go differently. So, how would you rank, I guess, or give Neil Brown a letter grade? Now we're in the middle of November of his second season. Of course, these are unprecedented times, no doubt about that. But how would you give him a grade as to how he's done in his first year and a half in Morgantown?
I think it's been A minus, B plus. Maybe I tend trend toward A minus in part because you see the product that he's putting on the field. You see them making the progress. Like I said, from a team last year that everybody was expecting 4-8, 3-9. I mean, it was, things did not look good for that team last year. And instead they go 5-7 with a couple late wins. This year, who knows, maybe 5-5, and it might still end up being 5-5, but extenuating circumstances in close games, team looks better. It's getting better. The roster is getting better. They've been finding ways to kind of build that depth and build up the talent. And I'd give him the edge from B plus to A minus because of his recruiting. The first full class that he had, the 2020 class, the one that arrived in January, between January and July, depending on if they're early enrollees or not, that was the highest rated class in West Virginia history since they started doing internet rankings in 2000. And then this year's recruiting class, 2021, is a full point higher. So he's adding more talent in these last two classes than West Virginia has ever had. So I think that gives him a little bump and has to have Mountaineer fans excited about the future.
Going to put you on the spot here. With regards to the second-year head coaches now in the Big 12, Chris Klieman, Les Miles, Matt Wells, and Neil Brown, rank them 1 through 4. Who's done the best? Who's done the worst? I think we can all agree that Miles is probably down there at 4, but Tech is, I don't think Texas Tech's had much success there at number 3, but who's been better in your opinion, Klieman or Brown?
See, I would say that Kansas State, I don't know the complete ins and outs of all their roster, but I felt like they weren't going to be very good this year. I believe I had them ranked 9th going in to this season. So to see what he's doing, did last year and has done so far this year, I think really speaks volumes about his prowess as a head coach. So as of right now, as of November 16th of, 8 games into there's both teams' both coaches' second season, I might have to give the slight edge to Klieman. But like I said, I like where Neil Brown is going. I like what's happening here. And, I think maybe you look at in the next year, I think West Virginia is in a little better spot to succeed next year than maybe Kansas State is.
K-State's got 3 games coming up, Baylor, Texas, and Iowa State. I don't see them winning more than one of those games. I don't think West Virginia is probably going to beat Oklahoma or Iowa State personally, but if they do, and K-State can only win one of those games, I think you've got a real, legitimate argument for the Mountaineers and Neil Brown becoming kind of that coach, that hire of the year. If you're going back a year before, that was really one that looked really good if you're West Virginia. Looking forward here, like I said, Oklahoma, Iowa State left on the schedule. But before that, you've got a bye week if you're West Virginia. What are you, trying to, tweak and get your ins and outs fixed during this off week?
Really, it's just about getting healthy. West Virginia just finished 5 games in 5 weeks, the only team in the Big 12 that's having to do that this year. And Neil Brown said, before the TCU game that he could tell, that he could tell from his team and the way they were kind of limping towards the finish there. Letty Brown, like I said, got hurt in the Texas game. He didn't practice at all leading up to TCU. Now, granted, he ended up with over 150 yards rushing, but he said he was still banged up after the game. He wasn't 100%. So I think, he needs to get healthy. Some other guys need to take some time, get a breath, get recouped, hit the training room, and then kind of get back to it on Sunday or Monday and get ready for Oklahoma. Because I think if you try to go into Oklahoma and Iowa State for those final 2 games after that 5-game stretch you just went through, it's not going to end well for you.
Mm-hmm. We'll just take a step back and look at the Big 12 as a whole. Where would you rank the Mountaineers right now in the league? Do you think they're up above Texas or K-State or Iowa State? You know, one of those teams that are kind of lukewarm out there and, you know, competing for a top spot in the league?
I think for this year and specifically, or are you talking in general?
Just this year.
Okay, this year I think I got West Virginia 6th in my actually accomplished rankings, and look what they've done so far this year. And I think I have them 5th, right ahead of Kansas State and TCU. I gave them the slightest of edge over Kansas State because they beat Kansas State. Because I think heading into this past week, I had West Virginia, Kansas State, TCU kind of in that same little tier there of 5, 6, 7. And then West Virginia beat both of those teams. So I have given them the edge up to number 5 right now.
What's been the biggest surprise to you around the Big 12? A team like Oklahoma, loses a couple games early on. Iowa State's, still very much in the thick of things. K-State, like we said, they've shocked a lot of people. Baylor's been, pretty bad to say the least. So what's been the biggest surprise to you so far?
I don't know. The 2 early Oklahoma losses, I mean, again, Iowa State and Kansas State are both solid teams, so it wasn't that stunning. But Iowa State, and again, they're 5-2 overall, 5-1 tops, leading the Big 12 standings right now, ranked in top 20. Man, I was one of the voters who had them number 2. I think in my preseason poll, I had Brock Purdy as my preseason Big 12 Player of the Year. I had, I feel like 8 Iowa State players on my All Big 12 team. That might be a little high, but I was all in on Iowa State before this year. And again, they're number 17. They're 5-2. They're inside track to the Big 12 championship game. But for some reason, I feel still disappointed in what they've shown so far this year. I don't know if that's just because I thought too highly of them before the year or had unrealistic expectations or what, but I was really thinking that they were this kind of dark horse to be a not only Big 12 contender, but maybe even a playoff kind of team.
Talking about the Big 12 championship, who at this point in time, who do you think are the 2 frontrunners to make it down there to Dallas?
Well, I think Oklahoma State is a big one. Oklahoma State and Iowa State lead right there, but I have a hard time. I went through this the other day because somebody was asking me if there's still any way that West Virginia could get in. And the answer is yes, but it would take a lot because the thing is those two teams at the top, Iowa State and Oklahoma State, hold a lot of tiebreakers over the teams that are behind them. In West Virginia scenarios, the scenarios I was trying to figure out, it ends up with a big group of everybody basically finishing 6-3, and that would put you do all that, you go through the steps, and West Virginia loses because the Oklahoma State game or the Texas game. So I think if I were to pick it, I think Iowa State's good. I think they're in. Trying to think who else I know they obviously have West Virginia. Who else they got? Kansas State and Texas.
Iowa State's got a game down there in Austin coming up in a few weeks. So
yeah, that's a tough one too. Oh, I'm in.
It's tough.
I was gonna say if I had to pick it right now, I would probably lean towards. Well, God, I guess I basically I think you got to pick two games, and you're saying the winner of Iowa State, Texas, and the winner of Oklahoma State. And if you're putting me on the spot to pick those 2 games. God, I'd hate to be that guy that says we're just going to circle back around and come up with Oklahoma and Texas again, but
that's what the Big 12 wants. Come on, man.
I don't know. That's tough. That is tough. I like the Oklahoma, maybe Oklahoma over Oklahoma State here. That Oklahoma State defense, I think, could really rattle Spencer Rattler, but yeah, put me on the spot. I'm going to go Oklahoma and Texas. I hate to say it. I really do.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I did the calculations probably last week, and I looked at it. I was like, wait, did I really just pick Texas to go to the Big 12 championship game? And as much as I hate to say it, and deep down in my heart, I don't believe they will be there. But when you look at the upcoming games, I think that, like you said, Texas beats Iowa State, and then with Bedlam, Oklahoma picks up a win there. So I'm with you. I think Texas and Oklahoma somehow, some way, after 2 early losses in league play, are going to get it done. The Big 12 certainly is going to be happy about that one. Last thing I got for you, though, here, Chris. Like I said, you got a game against Oklahoma and Iowa State here. to finish out the season. I said I don't see them winning either of those games. Do you disagree with me? Do you think they have a chance to win one or even both those games coming up here at the end of the season?
If the locations were reversed, like if it were, I think Oklahoma's going to be tough because Spencer Rattler, I think, in that offense, you get going, and the running backs they got churning out back there, just kind of chunking away yards. They run the type of defense that I think can really cause West Virginia problems. I think they get vertical, they spread you and run up the middle. That's the kind of stuff that can really hurt West Virginia, and especially with a mobile quarterback. So I think that is a team that's going to be hard to stop, especially because I feel like they've hit their stride now and they're moving in the right direction. But Iowa State, after watching them again, I was so high on them. I really thought they could contend, and they're still contending, but I really thought they would be, top 10 in the country. And they look a little more susceptible to me. They look like a team that West Virginia might be able to beat. And if they can catch them on a bad day, and again, if it weren't in Ames, I think I'd pick West Virginia. But the fact that it's in Ames, even if it's not full capacity for fans or anything, just the travel and the familiarity there for home for Iowa State, I might give them the slightest of edge. But I'd pick that one as a potential 1-1. I think before the year I picked a team to go 6-4, and so far all the games I picked have lined up, except for the Texas Tech one. That was one I picked as a win that ended up with a loss, and I had these last two games as losses before the year.
All right, well, there you have it. Chris Anderson from Ear Sports. Chris, thank you so much for taking time with me. I really do appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
That, of course, was Chris Anderson from earsports.com. Be sure to go check him out and everything they do over there. If you're a West Virginia fan, if you're a Big 12 fan, and you want to know anything about the Mountaineers, be sure to go check them out. They're the 24/7 sports affiliate of GoPowerCat.com. So anything you need West Virginia related, head over there, earsports.com. Chris Anderson and his squad do a great job. That'll wrap things up here, though, for the first half of the podcast. Second half coming up your way. We'll be talking about these upcoming games that we have on Saturday in the Big 12. Should be a lot of fun. Also be talking about our power rankings, kind of giving my reasons as to why I have the teams ranked where they are. Cole Carmody, he's the host of Cole's Corner podcast, will be hopping on the show with us, so stay tuned. Be right back here after a quick break on the 10 of 12 podcast.
Getting the crew together isn't as easy as it used to be. We get it. Life comes at you fast. But trust us, your pals are desperate for a good hang. And when they hear you stock the party with drinks from Drizzly, they'll be banging down your door. Let Drizzly, the go-to app for drink delivery, take care of the supplies. All you need is an excuse. It doesn't even have to be a good one. It's your dog's birthday. The loquats are finally ripe. Whatever. With Drizzly, you can compare prices on a massive selection of beer, wine, and spirits and get them delivered straight to your door. Which means you can entice the crew to leave their houses without ever leaving yours. Whatever the occasion, download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com today. Must be 21 plus, not available in all locations. Picture this nightmare scenario. You're hosting friends for the big game. It's neck and neck in the fourth quarter, and suddenly you realize you're out of drinks. You start to sweat. Your friends start to turn on you. You're forced to go on a last-second drink run and end up missing the game-winning touchdown while in line. Terrifying, isn't it? Luckily, you can avoid the drama with Drizzly, the go-to app for drink delivery. With Drizzly, you can shop a huge selection of beer, wine, and spirits, then get them delivered right to your watch party. Compare prices across multiple stores in your area, find the best deals on game day drinks, and get back to armchair quarterbacking from, you guessed it, your armchair. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com today. Must be 21 plus, not available in all locations.
Welcome back in here to the 10 of 12 podcast. I am your host, Ryan Gilbert. Second half of the show coming your way. Cole Carmody from Cole's Corner podcast joins the show. We've got 3 games coming up on Saturday to talk about. 2 of these 3 games are they're going to be a lot of fun. No doubt about that. These are 2 quality, or I guess 4 quality teams within these 2 games. Of course, that being Bedlam with Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. Game day will be out there in Norman. Should be quite the showdown for essentially, I don't know the ins and outs of the tiebreakers and stuff at the top of the league, but essentially a battle for first place out there in the Sooner State. And of course, we've got K-State and Iowa State up there in Ames. 3 o'clock on Fox as the Wildcats will take on the Cyclones. And then you've got Texas, who almost lost to Kansas last year. So I know most people are going to be saying, hey, this game's a gimme for the Longhorns. Shouldn't be close. I'm not going to rule out Kansas, too early in this game. I know, obviously, the Longhorns are the better team. They're playing for something. But Kansas will probably give them at least a fight. We'll talk about all 3 of these games here on the second half of the show, as well as briefly brush over our power rankings. We have a little bit of movement down there at the bottom, but we're bringing Cole Carmody here today. Cole, how's it going, man?
It's going pretty good.
Good
to have you. A lot of fun games to look forward to, no doubt.
We've got, honestly, the second half of the show is usually, hey, we talk about the game, talk about the spread, we move on and get on with my day, right? Now, these are 2 very good games that we've got, really here in the Big 12. And we'll obviously start it off with I think we'll start it off with Bedlam. I know K-State fans want to hear about that game against Iowa State, but this is, I would say, coming into the year, Oklahoma State. Can you think of a better game? Maybe Oklahoma Texas, just because it is a good rivalry, but this will be a lot of fun. 6:30 on ABC. Oklahoma is their stock is quickly rising in the Big 12. I don't think that there's anyone doubting that after their 2 losses early on in league play. They've looked really, really, really solid. They've got a bye week, but hey, so does Oklahoma State. These, like I said in the first half of the pod here, top half of the league is all on bye last week, so it's kind of a level playing field for K-State, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State as well. I think Oklahoma State's struggles have been a little more prevalent in the last couple of weeks. I know they struggled against West Virginia, like we talked about with Chris. They struggled, against Texas, and of course they lost that game. But even the K-State game, only won it by 2 points. They've had their scares this season. Cole, do you think that Oklahoma State continues to kind of struggle and turn the ball over and kind of rely on, I'm not saying Spencer Rattler's going to have a fumble 6 when you turn the ball over and they run it back for 6, what Will Howard did? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but do you think Oklahoma continues to struggle, or do you think that maybe Oklahoma State, do you think that the Sooners would rather maybe they struggle and come back down to earth after some quality games in the second half of the league?
Well, it's so hard to look at this game and really say one way or another who's going to come out on top, because both of these teams, let's face it, Oklahoma was extremely inconsistent to start the season. I feel like people kind of forgot about them. They kind of went to sleep on the Sooners, and then all of a sudden you look up and they're 4-2 in conference play. They're number 18 in the country, and they're playing with a very legitimate chance to make the Big 12 championship game. But I do think it's important to remember that I'm going to assume that Tylan Wallace will play in this game, because
that's big, yeah. That's
he
big.
was, ruled out last minute against Kansas State. He warms up, and then he doesn't play. So if he plays in this game, assuming Chuba Hubbard is healthy as well, I got to be honest, I really like Oklahoma State in this game. I think they have playmakers on offense. Not saying that Oklahoma doesn't, but I just think that this is Oklahoma State's time to really, I don't know if you'd say shock the world, but I think maybe shock the Big 12 Conference at this point.
I don't know if it's necessarily a shock. I'm high on Oklahoma here. I think the Sooners will get it done at the end of the day. But, Oklahoma State is pretty much the unanimous number 1 team. If most people you'd ask. I know that, Chris is very high on Iowa State. You appear to be, Oklahoma, it's not necessarily going to be too much of a shock. The Sooners right now are a 7-point favorite. We're recording this on the Monday, so that, of course, can change. I think it was about a 9 or 10-point spread, so it's actually shifted in favor of Oklahoma State just by a hair or two. So the public's kind of with you, Cole. I don't think it's necessary. I think Tylan Wallace has to play if the Cowboys want a chance. If he doesn't play, if he doesn't suit up, well, I think he'll suit up, because we saw him. They kept showing him on the sideline in Manhattan. It was like he just wanted to go and play, and they weren't letting him, obviously. But he was eager. He was anxious. I think that he's going to make some big plays if he's in there. Obviously, when you talk about Oklahoma, that it's definitely a team where their offense is the bright spot of the team, but the Sooner defense isn't too bad. So I'm actually kind of intrigued by that matchup and how they'll go up against each other. But defense, if we're going to talk about defense, let's be fair here. Oklahoma State has the best defense in the Big 12. I don't know if there's much disputing that. Maybe K-State's defense, if they had a better offense, who knows how much weight would be taken off of that group of guys' shoulders. West Virginia's defense is fine as well, but Oklahoma State's it's second to none in my mind right now in the season. So who do you think's going to really I guess you kind of answered it already, but just with the matchups here, you've got a really good Oklahoma State defense who's probably better than their offense. You've got a really good Oklahoma offense who's probably better than their defense, right? So what plays need to be made, Cole? I know you just did a podcast with our own Ryan Wallace from Go PowerCat. You played football. You know the X's and O's, the ins and outs, the schematics, probably a hell of a lot better than I do. Let's be real. So what needs to happen for Oklahoma State, for Oklahoma, to win this game?
I think if you're Oklahoma, I mean, obviously you got to score points, right? You look at their last few games, 62 points against KU and 62 points against Texas Tech. And then if you want to throw in 33 against TCU and 53 against Texas. So just by looking at the statistics, the 46.1 points a game jumps out at you. But really, I think when you kind of take more of a deeper dive into it, well, how are they getting those points? It's from big plays, from dynamic plays, from chunk plays. If you're Oklahoma State, you have to minimize those. Mm-hmm. It sounds obvious enough, but if you can limit those chunk plays, those big plays, not only are you going to have a better chance at stopping them, you're going to have a better chance at winning the field position battle. And it would not surprise me if this game is 27-21 or if it's 21-17. I think that every time we think that there's going to be a shootout, in most cases it doesn't happen. Even for instance, the Texas game, that 53-45, 4 overtimes. It was 20s when it went into the first overtime. So I think if you're Oklahoma State on the defensive side of the football, you have to minimize the chunk plays. Now, flipping the script, if you're Oklahoma and you're on offense, obviously you want to get those chunk plays, but I still think you have to keep the ball out of Spencer Sanders' hands because they are so dynamic, and I think the argument can be made that if Spencer Sanders is playing his A game and Spencer Rattler is playing his B game, Spencer Sanders might be a little bit better. That's to be seen, and that's a debate for another day. But I don't think that this Cowboys offense is that far away from being at the level of the Sooners offense. You mentioned Oklahoma State's defense. I do think Oklahoma State's defense takes the edge in that department.
I would love to fall in love with this Oklahoma State team. I really would because of what we've seen. Their potential is really, there's a lot of upside to that team. They've got probably the best wideout in the league, Tylan Wallace, probably the best running back in the league, and Chuba Hubbard, right? I think Spencer Sanders has really been the issue for the Cowboys, and not to be rude or harsh, on the young guy because he is a young quarterback, but he's made some dumb plays. We saw it here in Manhattan. He, a couple throws that you're just not supposed to make. I think it was 6-0, 5-0 in the turnover margin against Texas, and some of those were just freak plays. So I don't necessarily, think that I personally don't think Sanders is going to make those plays again. But also, he did make those mistakes. Okay, was it a lack of preparation? Was it a lack of mental readiness, physical readiness? Not being ready for the snap. That's a simple, talking with your center. Hey, this is going to be a hard count here. Things of that nature. There's so many things that I think that Sanders has done wrong this season, and he's got so much raw talent that, and I want to be fair here. Sanders had his injury that missed, sidelined him for over a month of the season. I think it was only 3 or 4 games in real time because of the cancellation and the bye week they had early on. But overall, I think it's on Sanders. I think you get Wallace opportunities, he's going to make those plays. You give the ball to Chuba Hubbard, he's going to make those plays up until the point where, if the defense starts, putting, filling the box up, then sure, he's probably not going to make those plays. So guess what? You've got the opportunity right there for Spencer Sanders. So in theory, I think it sounds great that Oklahoma State gets things, finally fixed this game. But I just don't see it. I think Oklahoma is really, really riding a train right now that I don't see them getting off of. At least this weekend, I think Oklahoma's going to run the table, but I wouldn't be shocked if there's a game or two where they're, down to the wire. So I don't think this one is the game, though. I think Oklahoma gets it done by more than 7 points, covers the spread. Of course, we're recording this Monday, so that is subject to change depending on when you're listening to this. Cole, I'm curious, 7-point spread, who covers?
I think Oklahoma will cover. I was just sitting here talking about Oklahoma State the whole entire time. I do think this game being in Norman does help the Sooners. I think Oklahoma will win, but again, it wouldn't surprise me if, this is a 4-point game. I think I think they'll cover, like I said, but I think it's going to be close. It wouldn't surprise me if, this game is 21-21 in the middle of the fourth quarter, and Spencer Sanders makes a mistake, and then the Cowboys go 3 and out, and the Sooners kick a field goal, score another touchdown, and it looks maybe a little bit wider than it is. But do not rule out the possibility of Oklahoma State winning this football game.
Yeah, I could see it both ways, but like you said, man, it could be close throughout, and then Sanders just makes one of those plays, and then boom, Oklahoma's off and running with it. But I don't know the over/under, but I'm even if it's 70-some points, I'm picking the over. Oklahoma's offense, we know what they do with the home run balls. Like we talked about, Oklahoma State needs to limit those, but they don't. I mean, that's a high-powered offense, and Oklahoma State's like they like to go no huddle and snap the ball with 30 seconds. So I'm certainly a fan of the over. And honestly, if it shifts over to 7.5 points, you might want to pick the Cowboys just because you've got that half a point there to cushion you if it is a touchdown ball game. And if it's 6.5, then you ride with Oklahoma because a touchdown ball game would favor the Sooners. So keep an eye on that line. I'm still comfortable with Oklahoma. I don't think that's really going to change, but I would keep an eye on this one as it is moving. But there you have it. Me and Cole, we both like Oklahoma, which means you should probably pick Oklahoma State because I feel like I'm always wrong with these. But we'll move on here to K-State and Iowa State. Like I said earlier, 3 o'clock on Fox. We'll have Brando yet again.
That's what I was going to ask.
You know what? He's doing his best, and he's providing commentary when his microphone is on. I know it's not always on.
He stayed up late. I don't know if you caught this. Washington State and Oregon State.
Yeah.
Pac-12 after dark, 10
Oregon,
o'clock
Washington
kickoff.
State, yeah.
Oregon, Washington State. He was on the call for that game. And so I got to go to sleep to Tim Brando on Saturday night.
Wow, that's just. I mean, you probably had some sweet dreams, didn't you? We'll have Brando. I feel like this is what the 4th or 5th game. It feels like we had him at TCU, then we had him at Oklahoma State, but with Iowa State here, I don't know how many times they've had Brando. What is our record with Brando? I don't know.
1-1.
No, we've had more games than I swear it's
2-1?
every game. I don't know. We'll see if K-State can get back on the winning track with Brando behind the mic. First initial thoughts about this game coming up on Saturday as we stop talking about Brando.
I'm a little nervous for K-State. You mentioned I did a podcast with Ryan Wallace earlier, and earlier in the week, Chris Kleiman had said that the number of players available for this game might be in question. So we're sitting here on Monday evening recording this. There's a chance this game might not get played. Now, from everything that I can tell within the program, I think K-State will play because they were up to this same situation against Oklahoma, and they ended up getting a win. So who knows what's going to happen? But as far as the X's and O's go, obviously, anytime you have a freshman quarterback going on the road, it's going to be difficult. I mean, Iowa State fans know when Brock Purdy's freshman year, it was the same thing. Obviously, Brock Purdy was a little bit more highly recruited than Will Howard was, but it still holds true. For K-State, how do you win this game? I think you have to run the football and play good defense. That's been the secret. When K-State has won games, that's what they've done well. If they can do that again, they're going to give themselves a shot. Now, I still think K-State has a very good chance to win this game, and we'll talk about it more here in a second, but just on the surface, it's an interesting matchup for the Wildcats.
You bring up a good point. K-State wants to play this game. That's something we've talked about repeatedly here at Go Power Cat. They want to play. I don't know what the number is of the threshold that needs to be met. If they can't play, per NCAA or per Big 12 rules, it's obviously not going to happen. They're not going to, break any rules in that regard, but they want to play. They're not going to make any excuses. They're not going to back down. And like you mentioned with Oklahoma, they had half their team out, it felt like, and they somehow won that game. So they don't want to postpone anything. They want to play. They want to get their football in. And, tip of the cap to Chris Kleiman for wanting to play these games. Last weekend we had over half of the SEC's games get postponed. And the Big 12, other than TCU and Baylor, have been very clean with COVID. I know Oklahoma State lost a game with Baylor, but that's because it was Baylor, right? Oklahoma State's been fine. So, overall, I give Kleiman a lot of credit. They want to play this game. However, I'm not confident that they can really, win this game. With what Wallace talked about on your podcast, dude, it's not, and this is something I've talked about pretty much every week on my podcast, it's not a tough code to crack, okay? Deuce Vaughn, you stop him, even if Briley Moore plays or doesn't play. Like I said, this is Monday. We don't know if he'll be active. You stop, put Moore aside. You stop Vaughn. Put Briley Moore aside. You stop Deuce Vaughn. You're going to win if you're an opponent, unless you're KU, obviously, and you're just that bad of a team. But you've got a freshman quarterback, right? You've got an offensive line that's young and doesn't do terrible, but doesn't do anything up to Big 12 standards, let's say, right? And you've got a wide receiver core that is, goes without saying that they're struggling this season. So it's a bad offense overall. I'm not trying to put blame on one specific group or person, but you stop Deuce Vaughn, and I don't see how K-State has a chance to win this game. And going off of Deuce Vaughn, you stop K-State special teams. You don't give up the home run ball. And we saw this against West Virginia. I think this is a very similar game with that Mountaineer game that K-State had, 3 weeks back, right? Neil Brown did a great job of stopping Vaughn, made sure they didn't give up the home run ball. And what was it, 40-something to 10 or 17? I don't know. K-State got blown out. They were never in the game. And obviously in real time, it was probably a little bit after halftime where you said, yeah, K-State's not going to win that game. But go back and watch. K-State was never in that football game against West Virginia. So that's what I fear most, is that K-State just is kind of forced to play football without the home run plays and without, Deuce Vaughn showing us his acrobatic skills. I think the Wildcats struggle. I hate to say that. I certainly hope I'm wrong, but it's an 11-point spread as of this moment, and I unfortunately am a fan of the Cyclones covering here. Cole, do you agree? Do you disagree?
I disagree. I think that anytime it seems K-State plays Iowa State, something crazy happens, right? They don't call it Farmageddon for no reason. And
is it a rivalry?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
I 100%.
Okay, we've been talking about that
rivalry.
at GPC, so you've got +1 for the yes.
Maybe it's just a Twitter rivalry. I don't know, but I think it's a rivalry. I think that this game, I said run the football and play defense, and I'm sorry, but Brock Purdy at quarterback for Iowa State, he has been less than admirable. I guess you could say.
Or it's not Brocktober, so you're right.
Yeah, I don't know what it would be. November.
Yeah, exactly. His time is done.
I think he struggles in this game. I really do. K-State really got to him last year in that game in Manhattan. I think this defense is astronomically better than the defense was last year. I think if K-State scores 24 points, that they can win this game. I mean, the first half against Baylor last Saturday, Iowa State struggled mightily, and we saw a Baylor team that completely lost it against Texas Tech on Saturday. I think Iowa State is a little bit overrated at number 17 in the country. I think K-State's just as good as them talent-wise, especially if you have Skylar Thompson will be playing quarterback. I think that the Cats definitely they probably win this game. I like K-State to cover the spread. I don't think it's going to be an 11-point game. I think K-State can win this game. I'm probably not going to pick them to win the game, but if it's close in the fourth quarter, K-State will win this game. There is no doubt in my mind about that. And if the Cats win this game, looking on down the road, I think there's a good chance that they end up in the Big 12 championship game.
Ooh, there you go. Hot take here from Mr. Cole. You go back to Oklahoma State, how we were talking about that team's struggles and how inconsistent they've been. And you almost feel like they're close to getting over the hump and being an elite team in the conference, but they're just not there. So I'll agree. I think Iowa State's kind of in the same boat. There's a lot of hype coming into the season. Matt Campbell is somehow touted as an elite coach, which doesn't make any sense. But the potential, it feels like it's there. But like you talked about, they struggled against Baylor. The game before that, I believe, was Kansas. They struggled in that one as well. So that's a team that has shown their weaknesses. And I'm with you. If K-State can hang around, I think they've got a good chance. I think 24 points. That's certainly, if K-State's offense can score them 24, I like their chances to actually win that game. But getting to 24 points is obviously the issue, if you ask me. Can Deuce Vaughn give you a home run ball? Sure. Can special teams get you one of those plays? The defense, sure, that can happen. But I'm very concerned about the offense scoring that many points. I hate to say it, but I really am. I think the defense can certainly hold them to 24 points or less. But the offense is the level of concern for me. Let's not forget that, basically the last time K-State went to Ames, that was, the coffin, the nail in Bill Snyder's coffin. So we've got I wouldn't say a majority, but a good number of these players remember that. And I know they love Coach Schneider, and that was not the way they wanted to go out. K-State was looking like it 100% going to be playing for a bowl game, and that just kind of vanished there. I don't remember it was probably a 2-touchdown lead or so in the fourth that K-State ended up blowing. So I think they're going to come out firing. I do see the reasons to believe in K-State in this game. But with regards to COVID, K-State's banged up, and Briley Moore is a difference maker, but with or without him, I think with him it'll make it a little bit closer, but without him, K-State doesn't stand. I don't think too much of a chance in this game. It is very tempting. You bring up some really good points, man, that K-State's got a good chance to cover the spread. But I mean, let's be real here. You wouldn't call me crazy if I were to tell you that after this game on Saturday that K-State went out and lost it by 4 touchdowns, right? Because you sure maybe after West Virginia, there's no way that happened. That's crazy. But now we've seen it can happen. Football is a long game. It only takes 1 or 2 possessions for things to just completely change in a game. So at the end of the day, I do like Iowa State here to win. I do like Iowa State to cover, but I'm not too comfortable with it. Every bet I make, I'm not 100% comfortable with. This is one of them. Final thoughts here. I know we could talk about K-State pretty much all day long, like we've been doing for years, man. But what's your final takeaways heading into Saturday?
I think the weather plays a big role in it too. It's sunny and 75 degrees out here in Manhattan. The rest of the week, is it going to be like that in Ames? Weather can flip on a dime up there. Mm-hmm. And as crazy as it sounds, I mean, they're playing on natural grass. And I think that's something that people tend to forget. Weather has a huge impact when it's a grass field compared to when it's a turf field. So if it's any type of cold, any type of rain, it's going to favor the defense. So regarding, the over and under, I'm not exactly 100% sure what it is. Either way, I want to take the under in this game just because I don't think there's going to be very many points scored. Yeah. And when there's not very many points scored, I think history tells us that favors Kansas State.
Well, we'll see if you're right. We'll see if I'm right. We've got a little bit. I think the under is, both teams, especially Kansas State, man, with the way, we've talked about it here, they're going to want to control that clock. I mean, it goes without saying, right? That they're going to want to run the football, do the old, slants, screen passes, things to keep the ball in their hands, not pick up those home run plays, which, of course, would favor betting the under. So, Cole, you like K-State. I, unfortunately, am on Iowa State here. As we move into the last game, this will be pretty quick. I don't know if there's much to say about KU and Texas. Currently, 29.5 points for the Longhorns, which is a lot of points. I always like to bring up that when you bet on a game like this, Texas can easily be up by 35, 40 points, and then boom, KU, garbage time, goes out and scores a touchdown. So it's always iffy. But I like Kansas in this game. It's in Lawrence. We love to talk about Go Power Cat here. When cold weather teams are hosting warm weather teams, they don't like it. It doesn't fit well with them, especially with a team like Texas. Okay, these guys are all, for the most part, from the South, right? They're getting these big time recruits where it's so rich in all those targets and prospects they're getting. So certainly that's a +1 for Kansas, right? A cold weather team hosting a warm weather team. I talked about it how last year it took a last second kick from Dicker the kicker for the Longhorns to beat Kansas, right? Yes, I just said that. It took Texas last year a last-second kick to beat Kansas in Austin. So, obviously, I think Texas is going to win this game, sure. But I think KU keeps it somewhat close and is going to cover that 29.5-point spread. Think about it. What is that? That's going to be 42 to, 14? Is that 28, right? I'm not good at math. I think it's 28. That could still happen, and KU's still going to cover that spread. So, as much as obviously Texas is going to get out of Lawrence with a win and keep their Big 12 title hopes alive, but KU's going to hang around. They're going to make it somewhat of a ball game. They've literally got nothing to lose out there in Lawrence. What say you, Cole?
I think you're right, but you're wrong because this Kansas team is much worse than the Kansas team last year. I think we can both agree on that one. This Kansas team has had no chance against any single team that they've played. There's no chance. There is not one moment.
They were hanging around a little bit with Iowa State, but for the most part.
For the most part, I mean, into the second half, no. I mean, you can look at even, Coastal Carolina. I watched that game, and you didn't think at any point that they were going to win that game, right?
You didn't.
I just don't see. I mean, if there's one game I think Kansas can maybe win, I'm looking at next week at home against TCU, senior night. It's a night game. Crazier things have happened, right? Happened last year against Texas Tech. They come out with a conference win. And it's not so much, I'm not a very big believer in Texas, quite honestly. I just think that this Kansas team is historically bad. This might be one of the worst Division I, Power 5 college football teams in history. And I think that's a debate that you can seriously make. I think Texas covers, and Kansas, they can't score. And when you can't score, it's hard to win. And it makes it even worse when you can't stop anybody. And recently, that's been the trend for the Jayhawks.
Yeah, KU's defense isn't terrible. Like, I was watching them against West Virginia. They were making some plays. It's just the offense. I like Daniels at quarterback. I like his potential, but the offensive line gives him half a second before he's got pressure and goes down or rolls out and throws it away. So, make no mistake about it. There is no home field advantage here. KU's, they're playing in an old high school stadium, it feels like, and there's probably not going to be any fans. There is no home field advantage other than the weather, and I don't know what it is going to be on Saturday, but if it's, sub 50, sub 40 degrees, I think that does favor Kansas, and, maybe that even causes, Dicker to miss a kick for Texas or, something crazy to happen. I'm not saying KU's going to win this game, but I'm going to disagree with you. Kansas is going to cover. Like I said, it could be 28 points, but it's still a win is a win if you cover that spread. So, I don't know if there's much else to say about this game. I pretty much like to brush over, these KU games. But if you've got anything else, please go ahead. And, Tech. Do you think Texas has a chance to make it to Dallas? They have. Let me rephrase that. They have a chance. Do you think that they will?
No, I don't. I think. I still think it's going to be hard for Texas to come into Manhattan on December 5th and get out of there with a win. And K-State could easily lose these next two games, right? They dropped their game against Iowa State, and then if they lose against Baylor, I still think there's a chance that they can beat Texas at home. And I don't think that's as much about K-State as it is about Texas. I think Texas, again, is kind of like Iowa State, maybe a little bit overrated. They've kind of gotten lucky with some wins. Bottom line is, I find it hard to believe that this Texas team, I know everybody wants to see OU Texas. I just don't see it happening.
Well, we'll have to find out with Texas. That's probably one last point that I've got. You've got aspirations. You've got that home game against Iowa State the following week after the KU game. You can't look ahead. You can't get too greedy. And that's maybe another thing, for my side of the argument that, you've got that marquee game against Iowa State. You can't overlook Kansas. You can't get too cocky. So we'll keep an eye on that game. It's Big 12 football. I know it's not the prettiest game, but real quick here, West Virginia, Texas Tech, TCU, and Baylor are all on bye this week, so we won't have any action from those teams. But let's wrap up the show here and talk about the 10 of 12 top 10. You've got Oklahoma State at 1. You got Oklahoma at 2, Iowa State at 3, K-State at 4, and Texas at 5. And then West Virginia is at 6. Those teams all have not changed at all from the previous week. So if you're curious as to why those teams are, where they are, I'd encourage you to listen to last week's episode. Skip ahead to the last half of the podcast, and you can kind of get, all the insights and information as to why I think that. But you can maybe make an argument for West Virginia hopping, a team like Texas or K-State. You can make your arguments, but I don't know if there's any sort of hot take in those top 6 teams. Would you agree that those are pretty, conservative calls?
I would rank them. I would rank them exactly like how you have them. Again, you bring up West Virginia, and I'm sure Texas fans think that they should be number 3, right? But I think that's how it shakes out as of this moment in time right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you for agreeing with me. I feel like you're the first person on this earth to do such a thing. We've got number 7 Texas Tech here, and this is the only change is Tech at 7. And now TCU at 8, which is, if I were to tell myself or tell you at the beginning of the year that Tech, whether it be, 9-10 or 5-6, right now it's 7-8 here with Texas Tech above TCU. I don't think I would ever believe anyone that told me that Texas Tech would be above TCU. but they are. The weather was not pretty out there in Lubbock. It was very windy. It was like a dust storm here, like we're used to seeing in Kansas sometimes. Did you see the wind? Was that 3 nights ago?
Oh, ridiculous.
Windy. It was so windy here in Manhattan. No, it was crazy. A win was a win. It wasn't pretty, but you beat Baylor at home, 24-23. You've only got 2 wins in conference play. I totally do get that. TCU's got 3, so +1 for TCU there. But you watch TCU. We talked about it with Chris here. They were ugly looking on Saturday. They lost to K-State, like we're very familiar with. I mean, they did nothing offensively in that game, and their defense was fine. Let's give them credit there. But, they just haven't had it. Gary Patterson has not had it with his team this season. So that's kind of why I have Tech jumping TCU. Tech's got a lot of potential. I mean, they really do. Columbia's a really good quarterback. I like what he's doing. And I don't think TCU just has much going for them. I really don't. Number 9's Baylor. Number 10's Kansas. I don't think you can dispute those 2 teams at the bottom. But what say you, Cole? Do you think that Tech is the better team than TCU?
I do, actually. Real quick, did you see that tackle? His name escapes. Schooler, I believe it was his name. But it was a great tackle, and he saved. It was a game saver for Texas Tech.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie Brewer was going in for a touchdown. He makes a tackle. They ended up having to kick field goal. Texas Tech wins by 1 point.
Yeah.
I think that might be kind of the switch that turns them around, right? Texas Tech has always been offense. Well, now if they can play some defense, all of a sudden you're looking at a team that, I'm not saying that they're going to be good next year, but if they have a West Virginia type of season as last year's West Virginia team, I think that's a realistic possibility. Obviously, Matt Wells came in at the same time as Chris Kleiman and Neil Brown, so I think they're kind of a year behind West Virginia's rebuild, maybe even 2 years behind. But I think they're trending in the right direction as opposed to TCU, where I am not sure really what's going on in Fort Worth, quite honestly. I mean, this was a team that had shown signs of life, but it just doesn't look like they want to play right now. And I don't know if that's coaching, if that's buy-in, or what that is, but that definitely has to be addressed.
Yeah, that was a question on the Power Cat Questions podcast last week. Is Gary Patterson, is time coming to an end in Fort Worth? And, it's a tough question. It's like, obviously he's not as old as Bill Snyder was or something like that, but I would have to imagine, I'm not close with the TCU, fan base at all, so I don't really know the general vibe of, what's going on there. But, boy, you have to imagine they're pretty antsy. Why are we struggling this bad, This would probably be a year, with COVID and everything, that TCU would have an upper edge on, a team with a younger head coach, right? You would think, right? Conventional wisdom, he's going to know how to get the best out of his players and be prepared. Certainly hasn't been the case this year, man. TCU, I think Duggan's injury early on this season is really, really catching up to them. They had their, good games. They beat Texas, right? They've played okay. But it's just as of late, man, I don't feel comfortable, really being high on this team and even complimenting them at all. So that's why I've got TCU down there at 8. Nothing else has changed. We had the top half off this week. That pretty much does it, though, for this week's episode. Hopefully it was a good listen. We only had 2 games to digest from last weekend. I know they weren't the prettiest. But certainly these games, especially K-State, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State, those will be some really good games of Big 12 football. Cole, I appreciate you sitting in with me. This is probably, the 100th time we've done something, whether it's a podcast, whether it's on the radio. I certainly, man, I miss having the radio show on Wildcat 91.9 like we had last year. But it's certainly good to see you keeping up with your podcast and doing that.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. Always good to talk some Big 12 football. And you know what? This weekend's going to be fun. I think this might be the best weekend we get in a while for some Big 12 football, so might as well enjoy it.
Yeah, and knock on wood here, you've got 3 games that are scheduled to be played. I know there's a little, skepticism with Kansas State, but, we've got football, and that's what I was saying last week, man. I know that Tech and Baylor are not the prettiest teams, but it's Big 12 football. It's not being canceled, and conferences like the SEC simply can't say the same. Special thanks, Chris Anderson, Colt Carmody for hopping on the show today. Usually we don't have guests, but now we double dipped with 2 guests with only 2 games this past weekend of Big 12 football. That pretty much does it here. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at 10of12 Podcast. You can stay up to date with everything around the Big 12 Conference, latest highlights and updates, scores, predictions. Everything is there on Twitter at 10of12 Podcast. Other than that, I'm Ryan Gilbert, and we'll catch you next week.
Get in on the action with the world's largest sports book, right at your fingertips. Circa Sports Iowa is where the pros play. Enjoy the highest limits, lowest takeouts, competitive betting menus, and the best customer service. Now you can download, fund, and bet like a pro from anywhere in Iowa. Circa Sports Iowa. Sports betting the way it should be. Download your new bookie today. Visit circasports.com for details.